Hello and welcome to the Geek Gallery, where we have pride as gamers, and I'd like to personally welcome you all to a new segment of the show I have lovingly entitled The Writer's Block. Here on the Writer's Block, we're going to take a look at the more literary side of geekdom. Webcomics, fan fiction, you name it. And I'm going to be bringing you the very best and very worst of everything in this category, and I certainly hope you enjoy it. I know I will, because we're starting off with one of my personal favorite webcomics of all time, Sabrina Online. Created by Eric Schwartz in 1996, the comic is a furry slice-of-life adventure that focuses on Sabrina the skunk, a young lady who just graduated from college and takes a job as a graphic designer for, surprise surprise, a pornographic film studio. Now, if you're at all offended by this, well, too bad for you. I personally like the way the comic was written like this. The plot itself follows a very episodic format, or an archetypal format, if you will. Every arc is divided up into several strips, with a few non-sequitur strips that usually focus on a subplot or a sub-story somewhere else in the comic's world. But to really understand why this comic is so great, we have to take a look at some of the characters featured in here. First, there's Sabrina, who is, of course, our main character, and she's quite a good main character. She embodies everything I think a main character should be. She's interesting, she's smart, and she also has her flaws, which is really important. She's best known for using an unconventional computer system, an Amiga system, but don't let that deter you, Windows users. Now, of course, she is a great main character, and there are a lot more reasons besides just her really likable personality. She also, well, she speaks for the geeks. I'll just come out and say it. Though she's probably not obsessive, well, except for Transformers toys. She collects those every chance she gets. But she's also just a really tech-savvy person, though that doesn't become evident until about midway through the comic thus far. When the comic starts, you have to remember it's 1996. Not a whole lot of people were really on the net surfing it to its full capacity up until the early 2000s, I think. But anyway, great character. Let's move on to the next one. Next you have Amy the Squirrel, her husband Thomas Wolfe, and their son Timothy. All of these characters live together with Sabrina as her roommates, and, well, they pay rent with her. And Timmy actually has a pretty funny running joke where he constantly destroys Sabrina's Transformer toys. Other than that, though, they usually have their own alternate story that coincides with whatever adventure Sabrina happens to be on. Most of them are pretty romantic and pretty funny. Now, these characters are also very likable and very fun to read about, but my one real complaint with them is that in certain comics, particularly during Amy's pregnancy with Timothy, which happens very early on in the comic, within the first year or so, I think, it's not really that subtle. A lot of the innuendos are really thrown right into your face, but other than that brief period, they do straighten out, and we get some very nice, very tender moments with them. Actually, there are quite a few other tender moments with another character, so let's take a look at our next one. Then there's Richard Conrad, or RC as he prefers to be called. He acts as Sabrina's boyfriend throughout the run of the comic, and he's also a pretty shy guy, and also a Windows tech expert, which does cause some very humorous tension between the two when they first meet. But they start an online relationship, and it works out very well. And I'm pretty impressed about how this is handled. I mean, most people in the same situation would have implied that starting an online relationship wasn't the smartest thing to do. Which in some cases it's not, if you're like 12 or 13. But it's nice to see it thrown into a positive light for once. Every time I see one of those things, it's always somebody's overreacting about it, or something didn't work out, or something horrible happened. But I really like how it was handled in this comic, and Richard's a pretty cool character, if a little shy. Though I also have to admit, I wonder why he's always wearing suits. Is he just that fancy or formal, or does he understand the old adage that every girl crazy about a shine as me?
Now, I've noticed a tendency for this program to get rather silly. Now, I do my best to keep things moving along, but I'm not having things getting silly.
Alright. Fair enough. Moving on to the last character. And the final main recurring character that we have is Sabrina's boss, Zigzag. That's right, the Zigzag is in this comic. Now, if you're unaware about who Zigzag is, you probably haven't spent a whole lot of time in the furry community. Zigzag started out as a character made by Black Rabbit, a rather influential artist in the furry genre, and who also has his own cameo character in this comic, by the way. And from there, she's gone on to be a Creative Commons character, someone who's used by dozens of artists all over the internet, provided that Black Rabbit's given proper credit for her. And from then on, I think her most famous appearance is actually the character that she portrays in this comic. She's a pretty easygoing, very helpful person, and I mean, she's probably the nicest person ever. Though she's very, very open.
You two hermits, stop that sketch. I think it's silly. What? It's silly.
Now, talking about the comic itself, at last, most of it is embodied in its characters. I mean, if you see a strip featuring Sabrina or Zigzag, you really know what to expect after a few panels featuring those characters. I mean, with Zigzag, you just know that there is going to be no such thing as subtlety anytime during the time that she's on camera. With Timothy and Thomas and Amy, I mentioned the subtlety is still there, but it kind of loses its edge. With RC or Sabrina, there's definitely subtlety there, but you can see some innuendos, and they're definitely nice people. But every single one of these strips is definitely just completely hilarious. I'll admit. Though a few of them may touch a few nerves if you're sensitive about things like innuendo or pornography or your choice of OS. Speaking of pornography, you'd think that a comic with a porn studio and a character like Zigzag would be a bit more promiscuous than it is, but this comic is actually very reserved. We're never shown any explicit nudity, and while there are quite a few sex scenes in it, those scenes are either occur in the dark where we can't see them, or behind a closed door, or there's just the feeling of implied sex. The closest that we get is this scene here of Sabrina and RC laying in bed the morning after, and it's more sweet than it is pornographic. Now, that certainly doesn't mean that this comic is for the younger audience. Like I mentioned, there still are sex scenes, even if they're not thrown in our face. Not to mention, a majority of the comic's humor comes from just how many innuendos and adult situations and conversations are had between the characters. It's funny, but it's not something you want somebody under the age of 13 to see, I don't think. Not to mention, porn studio. Do I really need to say anything else other than that? Its other brands of humor also come from real-life situations, hence the slice-of-life part of this, and it also has quite a bit of computer humor in there for the tech-savvy reader, which I am not. Most of it comes from the fact that, well, Sabrina insists on using an Amiga operating system, which is fine, I respect the choice, and there's also quite a bit of Windows bashing in this comic. So I'd be pretty careful if you're sensitive about which operating system you use. I don't know. I can't imagine why anybody would get worked up over an Amiga, but that's just me. So, do I recommend this? Most definitely. This is probably one of the best webcomics I've read in years, and I'm recommending it to everyone. Whether you're a computer fan, a furry fan, a slice of life fan, this just has something for everyone. And it's been on the web since 1996. I think that speaks for itself. You can't be on a place like the internet for this long and still be running and not be good. Okay, so maybe there are one or two exceptions, but for the most part, you have to be good. And that is why this gets my vote for one of my personal faves. I've posted the link. If you want to take a look, check it out. You will not be disappointed. This has been the Geek Gallery, first episode of the Writer's Block. My name is Goombasa, and I'll be seeing you later.
Tonight's such a beautiful crescent moon, changing every day, every night, shining brighter, just like something in the heart of bloom, glowing every day, every night, shining amber. Do you know when we feel like a cat, a wild cat in the cage? We cannot miss our time, so let's find a getaway.
Right, stop that! Silly!